Thanks a lot for being here and taking this interview with me. So my first question would be, what was the original occasion to transform Lingua into Glossa?
I was an editor of Lingua for about 10 years in 2009, I think, when a number of changes started to be implemented by Elsevier that I was increasingly uncomfortable with. When I started in 1999, the relationship with Elsevier was basically that of an equal partnership. The agreement was that they would publish the journal and disseminate subscriptions across the world, and that I would take care of the intellectual side of things. And progressively over the years, of the next 10 years, in fact, that relationship of equal partnership changed into an indentured-servantship in a way. I had the feeling increasingly that I was an employee of Elsevier's with a time-limited 27-page contract full of obligations and duties, and actually very little compensation. I mean, I was paid a yearly fee, but it was very little when you counted the time investment in the journal. I mean, I often quipped with friends that I would be much better off going to wash windows or distribute a newspaper in the neighborhood than to work for Elsevier at that price. So it was never about the money. It was mainly about increasing interference into the way the journal was run. Elsevier insisted on having a say on who was invited to the editorial team as an associate editor. There was insistence in the contract that every letter I wrote to an author or to a reviewer, and every review I added to the database of reviewers, was the property of Elsevier. We had yearly meetings with the journal manager, and figures and tables there were used almost as performance indicators, how well the journal was doing, performance indicators that, of course, the editorial team was responsible for and should improve. So those were the internal factor, dissatisfaction with the way Elsevier saw my position as a little cog in the big Elsevier machine, and also external pressures like the Elsevier boycott, reviewers informing me that they would refuse to review for the journal because of the Elsevier boycott. So both external pressures and internal pressures made me feel that the journal, as a meeting point of a community of readers, reviewers, board members, and editors, was no longer important to the publisher, but the only thing that mattered were sales of subscriptions in emerging markets, which had then to be reflected in the editorial team and board, and performance indicators and quantitative indicators that were judged to be more important than quality and community. So that's when I started exploring other options for the journal.
Thanks. I can see that there were many good reasons to look into other options. Can you elaborate a bit how you initiated the transformation to an open access model?
Well, I started the transformation by talking to my fellow editors, of course, first, and asking them whether they would be on board if we tried to flip the journal to open access. We all agreed that this would be a good idea if I managed to find the money for the transition, as well as a long-term solution for sustainable publishing to cover the costs. And in March 2015, we managed to get support from the Dutch Association of Universities and also the Dutch Science Foundation. And in August 2015, I met Martin Eve of the Open Library of Humanities. The Open Library of Humanities, as you probably know, is a publisher dedicated to publishing open access scholarship with no author-facing processing charges, and funded by an international consortium of libraries who want to make scholarly publishing fair and more accessible. And of course, libraries are the key in this, right? I mean, libraries will be there for forever, and they hold the key to scientific publishing. And to know that the Open Library of Humanities made use of university libraries in this consortial model convinced me that this was a long-term solution for academic publishing that the new journal could also be a part of. Of course, I also consulted lawyers on the best procedure to follow, and they advised us that we inform Elsevier that we no longer wish to work under the current conditions of the contract, and that we invite Elsevier to publish the journal in full open access for a reasonable and low fee. Now, of course, predictively, Elsevier declined our kind invitation. And when they did so, the editorial team and board collectively resigned in October 2015. And immediately we founded Glossa. Since I had a contract with Elsevier at the time, of course, we agreed with Elsevier that I serve out my term until the end of December 2015 without working for the new journal. And in the meanwhile, Glossa, the new journal, was run by two interim editors, Wally Paul and Guido van den Wijngaard, until I could take over as editor-in-chief on 1st of January 2016. Glossa then published its first paper in April 2016 with Ubiquity Press. And since then, we have published 640 articles in open access, 50,000 pages of linguistics that are free to read for everyone around the world. And this is something that I am particularly proud of, I must say.
Yes, I can imagine. This is a great success. So, did you encounter any challenges during the procedure?
Well, the principal challenges were finding money for the transition, really. For a large journal like Lingua Glossa that publishes 130 articles a year, you need a solid submission system. You need professional typesetting that can deal with tables, figures, and graphs that linguists use, but also with various typefaces and phonetic symbols, and also a platform that will present the articles to the outside world. That costs money, and there's no way around it. And money is not easy to find because, of course, there are many constraints on library budgets by the main publishers. So the capacity of initiatives like the Open Library of Humanities is similarly limited for the same reasons. They cannot take on an unending list of journals simply because all of the money is tied up in the big deals with the large publishers. So we were lucky to be able to join the Open Library of Humanities at the time that it was still open to additional journals.
Right, so finances are often a limiting issue when transforming a journal. So how do you cover your costs now?
Well, as I said before, the financing of the transition was provided by the Association of Dutch Universities and NWO, the Dutch Science Foundation. We also operate with an honor system where we ask authors who have access to institutional funds for open access in their universities or in their research labs, or those who have grants that contain funding for open access publications, to contribute a fee for publication. That fee is relatively low. It's 450 British pounds. So that most people can come up with that one way or another. And then about a third or half of our authors were able to contribute that fee, and the rest was paid for by the Transition Fund for 5 years. And since 2021, the Open Library of Humanities functions as that guarantee fund. They pay the costs of those authors who lack access to institutional funding. And that way we are able to find in what I would call an intermediate way between full diamond open access and gold open access. It is full diamond open access because, of course, the journal is accessible to all authors and readers and without a fee. I mean, and if you don't have money for a fee, you don't have to pay. But it is also fair open access, what we call fair open access, in that it asks those authors who can pay to contribute a low fee, or this low fee of £450 per article. So why the idea here is, why leave money on the table? If an author can contribute, why would you refuse his or her good money? Importantly, those authors that work in institutions that are members of the Open Library of Humanities, those authors never pay, because the Open Library of Humanities membership includes publication in their journals without further ado.
So my last question is, when you're looking back, what advice would you give to colleagues who also plan a transformation to an open access model?
Well, I have basically 3 pieces of advice. Prepare. In 3 areas. First of all, prepare your financial support. Make sure that there is enough money for the transition and for the long term, or choose solutions that don't require money. But make sure that you are well prepared. Second piece of advice, prepare your technological, legal and administrative support. So you have to look into the operational systems that will sustain your journal, submission systems, whether they're freely available, like OJS, for instance, or Janeway, publication platforms, Also check the publishing services that you want to purchase from providers, from publisher. At Ubiquity Press, for instance, we had a contract that allowed us to move to another publisher at the end of our contract or when we were no longer satisfied. Never, ever sign over your title, the name of your journal, to the publisher. We believe that the journal, its quality criteria and policies should be determined by the academic community, not the publishers. So we draw a very clear dividing line between the publication services that are purchased to publish the journal and the academic community that is responsible for the content and the editorial policies of that community and of that journal. And then a third piece of advice I would give is prepare your social support. I mean, that is really important. Prepare the community. First of all, talk to the associate editors and the editorial board to make sure that everybody is on board with the transition. So prepare the basis. This must be done with a certain amount of discretion because, of course, the publisher of traditional subscription journals can replace you at any moment if they get wind of your preparation. Once you announce the flip of the journal, also go all out on social media to convince the community at large that this is what you're doing. You will be astonished to see how many people will support the good cause. I certainly had never expected in 2015, 2016 in the transition that the amount of overwhelming support that I got on social media, especially on Facebook, where we now have something like 5,000 members. I mean, linguistics is a relatively small community, about 30,000 practitioners, professional practitioners in the world, I believe, something like that. I was completely surprised by the backing I received from the community. So if you do this, you can be sure that you will get the backing of the community. But of course, you have to maintain that community. You have to make sure that you announce what you do, that you announce also when there are new papers available. But social media presence certainly helps to make the transition a success. Finally, and this is a fourth piece of advice, but more in a way of a conclusion. Talk to people who've done this before. You're not alone in this. Not just the editors at Glossa. I mean, I'm always available to talk about this, but also the editorial team at Algebraic Combinatorics, for instance, who have done this in mathematics. Ludo Waldman and his team at Quantitative Science Studies. I mean, we collectively now, I think we have a clear roadmap how we can flip journals to open access. Flipping a journal is certainly not for everyone. It takes preparation, dedication, and stamina, but there is really no greater reward than someone writing to you from a country where there is no money for subscriptions to tell you that they are so pleased to have access to your papers in the journal. And that, I think, is the way it should be. Scholarly results should be open to all, because you really never know where the next good idea will come from. Thank you.
Well, yeah, many thanks for sharing your expertise with us, Johan.